Hallo allemaal, welkom bij dit filmpje over het laatste zintuig dat we bij dit thema gaan behandelen, het oog. Het is de bedoeling dat je dit filmpje kijkt ter voorbereiding van de eerstvolgende les. In de les komen we terug op de informatie die in het filmpje gegeven wordt. In de film die je straks gaat zien, krijg je informatie over de bouw en werking van de ogen. Ook worden er vragen gesteld die je moet beantwoorden. Als je de film helemaal kijkt, kom je de antwoorden op de vragen vanzelf tegen. Maar als je denkt dat je al over voldoende voorkennis beschikt om de vragen zo te beantwoorden, dan kun je in de inhoudsopgave zien waar in het filmpje je de vragen kunt vinden. Het bekijken van het filmpje en het maken van de vragen neemt ongeveer een half uur in beslag.
It's more sensitive than any camera. It's as individual as a fingerprint. It can betray your emotional secrets. And its lining is actually part of your brain. This amazing organ not only sees, but also makes sense of the world around us. Take an in-depth look at vision through the eyes of an artist. Next on Body Atlas. Every morning, the sun's rays burst into our world, flooding it with light. Like most living creatures, we've evolved eyes to use this light to help us understand our surroundings. When we look at a scene or an object, no matter how confusing or complicated, we're able to interpret it very quickly. Are we seeing 4 objects here? 1 in each corner of the picture? Of course not. Clearly, it's a human face behind a window frame. Caroline, our artist, will use this skill when she starts painting. But Guy, who makes art films, must use a camera, and the camera can't make that judgment. It can only capture an image. We think we see pictures like a camera, but our eyes and brain are doing something far more complicated. A camera records every little detail, including all the changes of light. But the human eye concentrates only on what's important. For example, the color of an orange always seems the same. In reality, our eyes and brain identify the color orange under different lighting conditions. We recognize a banana partly by its color and partly by its shape. If we want to draw a bowl of fruit, we look for edges, shapes, textures, and shadows. First we scan, and then we analyze a scene for all those characteristics. A camera can't do any of that. As Guy makes his video of how the artist works, his camera simply feeds the picture onto a tape and to this television set, leaving it up to our eyes to make a final analysis. As a skilled artist, Caroline has an eye for good composition. Her brain and her eyes always work in unison to see and interpret the world. And our eyes provide others with a pathway to our brain and personality. As they see us, our eyes are the window to our intelligence, our consciousness, some say even our soul. They certainly reveal the focus of Caroline's attention, but we can also tell when she's tired or distracted. They signal our emotions of joy, anger, or distress. Is there anything wrong? Well, not a lot in this case. Just her father trying to help in the kitchen.
Well, I gotta have lunch.
Against irritations or invasion, our eyes have successive lines of defense. The eyelids blink to seal the eye, or the lashes may block dirt before it gets in. If anything from the outside world does get through, the next defense is water to wash it away. Our eyes produce a lifelong trickle of tears. They come from glands high up under the outer corners of the eyelids and flow continuously across the eye, bathing it in a watery layer. Tiny glands dotted along the lower eyelid produce oil. This oil separates the water from the outside air to form a thin, smooth, unbroken film. It protects the whole exposed surface of the eye. That's the oil film emerging from beneath her eyelid. The water also contains a bactericide to help prevent infection. Our tears rarely overflow. Instead, this tiny river washes away dead cells and dust, even tiny hairs, towards the inner corner of the eye, where it drains into a hole. That tube passes all the debris down into the nose. We blink so often, our eyes are shut for almost half an hour each day. Caroline, satisfied with her sketch, will now move on to oils, and her blink rate changes at each stage of her task. As she concentrates, she blinks less. Each eye is a ball, an inch across, that weighs 1/4 ounce. It's turned and rotated by a combination of 6 muscles. There's even a pair that can twist it just a little. The complex process of vision starts here. Light enters the eye through a transparent window in the eyeball, the cornea. Its bulging surface bends light to a focus inside the eye. The cornea is constructed like the laminated windshield of a car. It's made up of 3 main layers, and although there are plenty of pain sensors to remind us to take good care of the cornea, its elastic central region is tough. And it supports a layer bursting with life that's just 5 cells thick. This constantly renews itself. New cells grow from the inside, and within a week they reach the outer surface. Here, the oldest cells break free and, still alive, are sloughed away by our lifelong flow of tears. To focus sharply, the outer surface of the cornea must be absolutely smooth. To correct any slight unevenness in the outer layer of cells, the oily surfaced film ensures a smooth finish. Tiny blood vessels supply the whites of our eyes with oxygen and nourishment, but they come to an abrupt stop right at the edge of the cornea. So beyond that, we have a clear window to the outside world. Behind the cornea, we encounter that most distinctive feature of any eye, the iris. Named for the goddess of the rainbow, the iris is a rich panoply of color and texture. The colors are inherited, but because they don't affect how the eye works, the fine details can vary greatly. It's a mark of your identity, with patterns of lines and flecks that are as unique and personal as a fingerprint. Under the microscope, the iris is a work of modern art. White connective fibers attach the colored cells to tiny muscles which regulate the pupil. This may reflect your emotions. When you're in love, the dark pupil can become immense. But it also serves a more practical purpose. It gets larger when it's dark and smaller when we're exposed to bright light. Look through an enlarged pupil, and only part of the view is sharp. Turn up the light, and when the pupil shrinks, more of the picture now appears crisply in focus. The iris is surrounded by a clear, watery fluid. It flows all the time, replenished every 4 hours from glands behind the iris to nourish parts of the eye that have no direct blood supply. It flows forwards through the pupil to bathe the inside of the cornea, and behind the iris it washes over another bulging lens. Seen from inside the eye, looking outward, this slightly yellow second lens hangs by fibers like the spokes of a wheel, and the whole lens is encircled by a ring of muscle. And that muscle can squeeze and change its shape, fine-tuning its focus. The lens must become more curved and thicker if we're to see nearby objects in focus. Sadly, the design isn't perfect. As we get older, cells deep inside the lens begin to die off. Choked by dead inflexible layers, the lens stiffens. Beyond the age of 45, most of us find it harder to focus on nearby objects.
So, how's it going? Have some tea.
Oh, thanks.
What's next?
I'm just putting in the shadows here to give some form.
What do you use for that?
Payne's grey and mauve.
Caroline's father is on the wrong side of 45.
Let me put some glasses on. Okay, so it's mauve, blue shade it says, right? Okay, blue shade. You can see the picture better now too.
Still a young woman, Caroline has no difficulty focusing on her painting. Just as the liquid in the glass bends light, Caroline's fluid-filled eyes do the same. When she looks at an object, the light bends at the front of the eye, then passes through a natural clear jelly to focus on the retina. As she continues to work on the painting, she's totally unaware of a bizarre phenomenon. The optics of her eye have turned the image upside down on the retina. It's up to the brain to turn it back again, right side up. The retina covers 2/3 of the inside of the eyeball. Here at the back of the eyes, specialized cells soak up light and turn what we see into a stream of electrical signals. But when we examine a cross-section of the retina, it looks like someone made a crazy mistake with the circuits. The light has to travel through a dense wall of nerve cells before it strikes the detectors. These are the cells that make the difference between sight and blindness. You have more light receptors than there are people in the United States, all in the space of a couple of postage stamps. There are 2 kinds of receptors mixed together in the retina. Most are long, thin rod cells, which see well in dim light, but can detect images only in black and white. The stubby pointed cell is called a cone. It registers color, but works best in bright light. At the center of the retina, there's a dark region. In the middle of that, the microscope reveals a crater. This tiny pit is crammed exclusively with cones, and the wall of nerve cells that covers them is thinner. Here in the pit, light penetrates the retina more easily, and the cones at the bottom can detect the finest details of a scene. Without thinking about it, Caroline keeps the brush near the center of her vision, so its image falls on the cone-filled pit. So, her view is sharpest in the center and a little fuzzy round the edges. The sensitive center of the retina is easily damaged. the sun's intense focused energy could burn out those cells. Yet vision evolved to use light from the sun and to see it as all the colors of the rainbow. What we see is reflected light. From a lemon, only yellow light is reflected back to the cones of our eyes, so the fruit appears yellow. The human eye can distinguish thousands of colors, yet we have only 3 distinct kinds of cones to cover them all. One is sensitive to a whole range of colors, including red. A second kind centers on green, while the third favors blue. Just as 3 basic paints can be mixed to give an almost unlimited range of colors, nerve cells in the retina mix the signals from the 3 kinds of cones to give the illusion of other colors. It's only at the center of the retina that there are so many cones. Moving out towards the edge of the retina, the dim light detectors, the rods, take over. In this slice across them, the thick cones are far outnumbered by the colorblind rods. So the edge of our view is not just blurred, it has less color too. All of vision depends on chemical reactions inside the rods and cones. Inside the eye, rods and cones turn what we see into electrical signals that flow through a network of nerves. But all these nerves are more than just wires carrying messages to the brain. Like a vast array of computers, they analyze the signals to determine where the lines and edges are in what we see. The whole retina is actually part of the brain. And it's connected to the rest of the brain here, where a jumble of blood vessels plunges together with a thick bundle of fibers into the optic nerve. The optic nerve is 1,000,000 fibers thick. But now, look back to where the retina meets the optic nerve. To make way for all those fibers, the layer of rods and cones stops dead. So this small circle in the retina is blind, and it leaves an empty patch in our view of the world, as Caroline is about to find out. Close one eye, look at a finger, and move another towards it from the side. There's a place where the tip disappears. Its image is falling on the blind spot. It really is blind, but you may have to try hard to find it. Looking at the country scene with one eye, as we shift our gaze from one point to another, the blind spot is always there to one side. We don't see it like this because a special function of our brain, like a smart computer program, is always guessing what's in that hole and filling it in. Other programs in the brain help judge speed and distance. Like any animal that hunts, we've evolved eyes at the front of the head. Here, Caroline's eyes pivot inwards by an amount that reveals to her just how close that brush is. Distances in this painting are an illusion. It's flat, but our eyes can see 3 dimensions. The camera reveals how. As it moves from side to side, it gets different points of view, from the right and from the left. Our eyes also provide the brain with 2 images, but the brain has a program to combine them. Instead of this mixture, we think we see just one image in 3 dimensions. So Caroline can direct her eyes and her full attention to her painting. The electrical signals that activate these programs trace their convoluted pathways from the eye all the way through to the back of the brain, where we perceive vision. But as the signals split and recombine, it gets less and less like the picture she thinks she sees. The brain picks apart the components of the scene. She sees complex shapes, subtle colors, and must also see and guide the movement of her hand in response to them. One part of her brain analyzes the view and picks out lines and edges. The signals move on to a second region, which interprets color. And on again to detect movement, at each stage making more and more sense of the world around her. With so much complexity, the brain is easy to fool. This is obviously a white triangle with 3 equal sides. No, in fact, there's no triangle. It's just an optical illusion. And look at it from Caroline's viewpoint. The sides are not even equal. And what's this? It looks like a cozy house in the country. But truly, it's just lines on a piece of paper. Your brain has supplied the interpretation. Is this a vase? Or 2 faces? We see an optical illusion when there's more than one way for the brain to interpret what it sees. But these moments of confusion are a small price to pay for all the times the brain gets it right. Here the camera just records a white blob changing position and size. Our brain sees a horse coming towards us. Our brain's built-in computer makes sure that colors always stay the same, even if the lighting changes dramatically. The camera emphasizes the real changes, while the eye and brain insist that an orange is always orange. We've seen that visual perception involves electrical signals passing to many different parts of the brain. We register color and brightness. We detect motion, identify shapes, and gauge distance, speed, and size. We see in 3 dimensions when the retina picks up images in 2. The brain fills in the blind spot and cleans up the picture. In little more than the blink of an eye, it creates what we think we see.
That it?
And our artist knows with absolute certainty when she's finished creating her illusion of the fruit. Unlike the camera lens, our eyes see the ever-changing world around us through a filter of learning, judgment, knowledge, memory, and experience. They say the camera never lies, but maybe the eye does.